Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and sorry about the delay, but here I am. Today, we're going to be looking at more of that Joe Rogan, Experience podcast with Michael P. Masters, folks, and finally finish it off. Plus, we'll probably look at some other supernatural stories. By the way, folks, please share this live stream. And it's Sunday, so forgive me. It's a day off anyway. I slept in. That's why I'm so late today. Either way, let's go to share screen now, look at some Indiegogos and Kickstarters, and have a great time. Okay, so let's go over here, folks. Here we have Luminous Ages again, because I'm too lazy to go anywhere else. So let's once again look at this. Luminous Ages, Dragon Dice, comic books, RPG, and more. Let's jump right into it, folks. The Gaius Dragon Dice are made from copper. Yeah, the whole metal caged dragon dice, folks, and caged in the middle of them, each of these copper metal dice, is a trapped dragon, representing Gaius, the nature dragon god, from the creator of this, of Luminous Ages and 5th edition campaign, Anthony Christo. The inside of these dice is hollow, except for the caged dragon, allowing for a full metal aesthetic without the table-crushing weight of other metallic dice. Here you can see a picture of them, folks, including the enamel highlights, basically being the numbers have enamel paint on them, so you can easily make them out. Now, this beautiful, unique set of hollow metal dice, each features a dragon caged within the middle of them. They are made of copper and zinc alloy and played in a variety of metals with enamel highlights, as I said. They are perfectly balanced for a completely random roll. Each set includes 7 dice, 1 by d4, 1 by d6, 1 by d8, 1 by d10, 1 by d12, and 2 by d4. Well, 2 by d20, I meant. The 2 by D20, folks, are those multi-hedron type dice where you can get at least 20 rolls with one throw. Either way, they come in a variety of forms, folks. The dice here, you can get a set of rainbow anodized electroplated dice. You can see them right here, folks. You can also get antique bronze with green, and so on. There are also other varieties like black, nickel, and red, but the dice aren't the only thing in this campaign for Luminous Ages, folks, as you can see. There's also other things like this, limited edition premium gaming mat. And it's new to this Kickstarter, or should I say Indiegogo, because it's up on Indiegogo is what we're looking at, folks. It's a limited edition gaming mat. Guys, this mat will be limited to only 100 copies ever made, and is a premium gaming mat featuring stitched edges for longer life and an extra large size to fix more cards. Measuring 40 by 70 centimeters, approximately 15.7 inches by 27.5 inches, and each of these gaming mats is $80 each. Not bad. Now, remember the dice I basically mentioned earlier, folks, where basically this gaming mat is $80. You can back those set of 7 dice for $119 each, folks, which isn't too bad. If that's too much for you, there's also this set of spherical dice, which you can back for $99. But I think I would go basically for the other dice. Either way, accompanying these dice is the Torian dice bag, which they keep the dice in, folks. Each bag is $19 each. Plus, you could also back these sets of Torian coins as well. Either way, each coin is made of copper in a different color. Each coin is made of a copper and a different color. They can be used as D2 Lucky Feet tokens and inspiration tokens. You can get 8 coins for $70. Then again, there's also the books by Anthony Christo. Since 2015, Anthony Christo has released a total of 5 books, with only the most recent 4 still in print. He has been developing his fantasy series, Luminous Ages, which is a combination of comics, illustrated novels, and 5th edition RPG books. Each book is a limited edition, and all the hardcovers are limited to between 250 and 1,000 copies, with many books running out. Hurry and make sure you get each book. Now, you can get the Luminous Ages graphic novel, a comic book, or it's basically a bunch of comic stories, folks, in one set for $50. You can also get the Traveler Dreams illustrated novel, folks. It's basically a prose novel with some illustrated pages in it, folks. And you can get the By-Z and Book of Monsters comic anthology and 5th edition RPG for $69 as well. Basically, it's a few more comics, but also it's basically a book of monsters that you can play in the game, folks. And it has and it's fifth edition RPG material for Luminous Ages, telling you how to play the game, I guess. Either way, as it says, it's fifth edition compatible as well because it's 5e, so it's compatible with fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, as far as I know, folks. I'm just guessing at that, but so don't quote me on that. Maybe I'm wrong. Either way, fifth edition probably means basically, I said it's probably compatible with fifth edition, well, Dungeons and Dragons. Then there's also the Swirl Worlds and Oddities art of Anthony Cristo for $45. It's basically an art book, detailed with basically filled with pages of Anthony Cristo's artwork. Either way, not bad. You can also get this by Z STL set as well, folks. These 55 STL files include a variety of humanoids and monsters for use in tabletop role-playing games. They feature designs of characters and creatures from the universe of Luminous Ages and Chinese mythology. And you can get 55 of these, files for $75, folks, and use your 3D printer to print them out for yourself. You get the files, print out these monsters and, basically characters, and you can have fun playing them in your 5th edition, basically Luminous Ages game, or basically Dungeons and Dragons. Not bad. Either way, you can also back a variety of other things as well, folks. Like basically these other gaming mats. There's 40 by 70 centimeter one for $75, or a 40 by 80 centimeter one for $90. Not bad. Look at these gaming mats. You can also get this limited edition Tavern of Dreams jigsaw puzzle. Basically, if the Tavern of Dreams from the said novel, you can get basically a puzzle of it, folks, and you can basically get it for $35. There are also other puzzles for $20 each. Either way, that was Luminous Ages, Dragon Dice, comic books, RPG, and more up on Indiegogo, folks. Not bad. But let's go over here, folks, and share this tab instead and look once more at Atheos. Let's jump right on into this NES game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. People are still making games for old systems, folks, and Atheos is one of them. It's for the Nintendo Entertainment System, so it looks good. Now, let's get into it. Explore, upgrade, survive. Humanity's last hope lies beyond the stars. After decades of war, Earth is a toxic wasteland. The distant world of Atheos is 10 light years away. Maybe humanity's salvation, but only an artificial explorer can survive the journey. You play as Kira, an autonomous synthetic AI. AI aboard the mothership Elysium. Years of orbital study are cut short when a massive energy surge cripples the ship. With damaged thrusters and failing communication systems, you must descend to Atheos, where survival becomes your only mission. Because beneath the planet's crust stirs Zyric, a colossal war construct in Nazari. Detecting your arrival, he scattered unstable energy cores to sabotage Elysium and stop humanity's foothold. Kara will not retreat. She must destroy the cores, restore Elysium, and confront Zyric. Humanity's future depends on stopping the Machine Titan before Atheos is lost. Okay, you can see a screenshot from basically the game, folks, with basically detailing some of the cutscenes in the game, and it looks good. But, folks, you can back Atheos for $12 for a digital version of the game to play on your computer, or $40 to get just a cartridge. Or you can basically go $60 and get basically the cartridge, the game manual, and a box to keep it in, all for a reasonable price of $60, as I said. Either way, that's Atheos, folks. Let's take a look at the, trailer for this, for this game now. Now remember, now remember everyone, Atheos is now finishing up on Kickstarter, so go check it out. Either way, let's go over here and let's go over to this. Back to the Joe Rogan Experience, basically, or should I say, this transcript one, basically the episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience, and get back to where we were talking about yesterday, folks, with basically Michael P. Masters. So let me look over here, folks. We looked at this, the pterodactyls of mummies of Peru yesterday, folks. You know, the supposed alien mummies from Peru, folks. That basically, some of them basically look very, very interesting. They could possibly be real evidence of of an alien presence on Earth, folks. While others were obvious, fakes. Either way, we looked at other stuff as well. But let's continue, folks, and stuff like that. Let me make sure I'm in the right area, folks. We did this. Yeah. Looked at this. Did we look at basically the Nazca mummies controversy, folks? Yeah. Or did we just get into that basically before we left off yesterday? Either way, folks, thank you for joining me. By the way, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can't get more people watching. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. And let's get into the stream now. Sorry about the delay, folks. As I said, it's Sunday, and I basically made a mistake. By the way, there's a good chance I won't upload my videos today, folks, because it's, once again, so late. But then again, maybe I will. It's after all, it's Sunday, so everyone's off. Either way, let's continue. The Nazca mummies controversy. Either way, it does look interesting, folks. So let's get this. Michael P. Masters, they're grave robbing, exactly, and that's a big problem, an ethical issue. Yeah. We already read this part, folks. I remember reading it yesterday. The pterodactyls and basically the mummies from basically Nazca, as well as Peru, folks. These pterodactyl, alien mummies. Either way, we looked at them yesterday, and they were very interesting. Either way, let's go down here. We looked at the Nazca Lines mystery, folks. So let me go down here, because I'm pretty sure we passed this part. So let me do this. Yeah, the dream experience. Yeah, we talked about basically Joe Rogan's experience with these alien beings. He says that basically it was the most realistic dream he ever had when he encountered these alien beings that spoke to him in his dream, folks. Now, it could be evidence that maybe Joe Rogan himself was abducted by alien beings, at least his mind. They talk about the unusual lighting, like basically in other accounts of encounters with alien beings, folks, where basically people who are in these UFOs say the place is lighted, but there's no obvious light source. He doesn't see basically any basically lighting, like say basically places where light bulbs would be situated into the ceiling. No, he says the light. Well, I should say most people who have basically experienced being on a UFO, folks, says the UFOs seem to basically be lighted, as if the walls themselves and the floor and the ceiling seems to glow with a light or energy that seems to emanate from somewhere else, or basically from inside, or basically just seems to emanate from the walls itself, to give you an idea. Or basically not just the walls, floor and ceiling and walls. So they talked about that as well, folks. So let's read on past this point. Either way, yeah. He had this conversation. He also had basically an information, or now they basically move on to the information download. Either maybe that basically, it could be that maybe Joe Rogan basically had something downloaded to his head, or basically like in other encounters, people have basically who've been abducted say that something's been downloaded into their mind, information that basically at times seems to come up, basically at a preordained time, along with their memories of being abducted. Either way, very odd. But did we read this part, folks? I'm pretty sure I did get through this part. Either way, so let's read the information download now. If I'll return basically up here if I have to. Either way, Michael P. Masters, to be able to get past that, to do things that need to be done, they told me what would happen. They said that I would continue looking, my eyes would be open, but this darkness would come from top to bottom, and they would put things in my brain. I would see it coming in, but I wouldn't have access to it once they were done. Do you agree? Yeah, they were very polite, extremely polite. Free will was conserved. Do you agree to this? Are you okay with this? Yeah, basically, this is Michael P. Masters describing basically an alien encounter that basically someone had, either himself or maybe an experiencer he basically interviewed. Basically saying during the during this conversation. He said these beings did basically put information into him. He went. It was at one point basically when this was happening. He went out like he basically was knocked unconscious, and basically when they were going to do that, folks, as this information was going to be passed right before this information was going to be downloaded to his mind, they asked. Yeah, they were very polite, extremely polite. Free will was conserved. Do you agree to this? Are you okay with this? And again, at that point, I remembered them. I recognized them. I was like, yes, absolutely, I agree to this. So you get the idea there, folks. That's exactly what happened. Eyes went dark, still wide open. Eyes went dark, and I see this massive, fast stream of information. Okay, so he wasn't exactly unconscious, folks. I thought he meant that, as he said, when everything went dark, I assumed he basically meant he lost consciousness. Either way, it was like basically he went blind there for a moment, and then he saw the information being passed into him. Yeah, it was going straight into my brain, as he puts it. It was exhausting. It didn't hurt, but it was really overwhelming. I have no idea how long they were doing this. Yeah, I could see. It was like I could see. I don't remember, but I could see and I understand the moment and that wasn't just me. It's been others as well who've had such a similar experience too. As I would imagine he's trying to point out there, folks. Like at one point, this conversation switched from vocal to telepathic. Like we just started communicating telepathically. It was so seamless. I didn't even really notice it happened. And eventually I'm like, wait, we're not moving our mouths. We're just talking with our brains. This is what Michael P. Masters describes here, folks, in this story. But the woman who brought me up there in the first place was standing on my left with her hand on my shoulder. She would occasionally go, did you get that? Did you see that? That was important. Did you get that? So she was watching it too. And I saw it coming in as it was coming through this individual in front of me. And I could see at that moment, I'd be like, like I understood it all. It all comes in. I have no idea how long I was in that mesmerized state, but after they finished, that entire room had 5 times more people in it. There was probably 20 people in this room, all looking at us like, what the effing is happening to masters out there? Like, what is going on, man? By the way, let me do this, folks. My head was a little bent there. By the way, please share this live stream, folks. Let's see if we can't get more people watching. Either way, folks, this is what Michael P. Masters describes happening to him, I guess. See, I wasn't so sure, basically, where we were in this article and stuff like that. Either way, they lifted me out of this, out of this site, returned from bottom to left, the opposite of what happened before, and I stand up, walk through this room, and I felt like my head was a bowling ball. Like I could barely even lift my head. And this woman, I think one of the ones that came out when we were on the balcony, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Are you okay?" I was like, walk past her. Fortunately, I was on the same floor, the 4th floor of this hotel, walked down, laid back on the bed with my feet still on the floor, all my clothes on, just slept in that position for about 13 hours. What? Didn't wake up at all. And when I woke up, I started crying uncontrollably. Like I could not stop crying. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I had memory of what happened that night before, but I was kind of fuzzy. And then as it started to come back more and more, I started to be like, oh, like that. That was real, My first thought was like, oh, that wasn't real. And then I was allowed to remember all of it. Everything before they put me in that state is like a crystal clear in my mind. And I wrote it all down not long after, just to make sure I had, so I just had this document of it and knew it and basically wrote down everything I could remember and not let any time pass before I basically so I wouldn't forget anything. So it wasn't me recounting me, something like that, you were saying. So there was actually a written transcript of how everything happened. Yeah, basically, it wasn't me recounting me. Yeah, recounting like you were saying. Yeah, basically, I was recounting everything I knew, everything I could. But it wasn't me. I was just recounting all the information I had. It wasn't like basically it was some force controlling me, but it was just putting down information and not basically trying to let my own recollections basically be clouded by basically, prior judgments or basically anything else. Basically how people tend to basically put their own swirl on things. I'm imagining here that Michael P. Masters was saying that he basically wrote down the information as clearly as possible. We talked about that yesterday, folks. He says he was recounting information, but was not recounting information that from himself. He wasn't trying to basically let his own judgments, his own personality cloud his basically recollection. He was just writing down information as clearly as he could remember it, folks. Not let any basically judgments, any basically prior thoughts he had basically cloud his thoughts and his recollection. Just wrote down the information as best he could and just let it stand as it is. And then basically Yeah, and then he could basically look back at the information, read through it, and basically remember what happened, and then he could let his own judgments, his own preconceived notions take over at that point. But because that's what he wanted to write down everything he could as clearly as possible, without basically, as I said, his own preconceived notions getting in the way. It's an interesting notion there, folks. Yeah, it's an interesting notion right there, folks. Either way, please share this live stream. So far, we have, 8 watching. Not bad. Either way, it's Sunday, folks. So let's continue and stuff like that. Yeah. Either way, he tried to basically remember everything he could, folks. But let me go back over here a bit. Either way, to basically just before this and stuff like that. Yeah. Joe Rogan, me, the information download and stuff like that. Or basically trying to understand this, folks, and stuff like that. Let me go back over here. Either way, I'm basically, yeah. Let me try to go up here, folks, because maybe I skipped a bit of this. Either way, let me go over here. Yeah. Michael P. Masters, a woman who I knew, but loosely, basically, I was downstairs. She saw, or they saw her through her. Yeah, or they saw through her, because this really gets weird. And I was out of money. I was trying to get a beer at the bar. Maybe I shouldn't basically go back over here, folks. Maybe I should go up here. Either way, the dream experience is basically Joe Rogan basically puts it, folks. Yeah. Basically, this is where he communicates. Basically, it says these alien beings were communicating him. And Michael P. Masters basically points out how his experience, even though basically Joe Rogan says he thought it was a dream, but it was the most realistic dream he ever had. But even he basically says, due to how realistic it was, that he knew that it was more than just a dream, folks. But he can't be for sure. Michael P. Masters points out how similar it is to basically other accounts of, basically interactions with aliens and abduction. Yeah. He goes on to say about unusual lighting and what was going on there, folks. So there's that. Either way, Masters 2022 experience. I read part of it to you, folks. This is where we left off yesterday. I couldn't find where I was. Either way, let's talk about Masters 2020 experience. We read basically the final part of it, folks, just now. So let me read this part now. Michael P. Masters, maybe so. I had a really insane experience in 2022 that forced me to start thinking about what this is and what this physical reality is. Joe Rogan, because I was shown 2022. Michael P. Masters, I call it a mini abduction. I was at a UFO conference, actually the same one where I was watching that with James Fox before it came out, the Virginia case. So I was taken up to this room that no one was in. I was taken on the balcony. I wasn't allowed to leave. Joe Rogan. Yeah, Joe Rogan. By who? Michael P. Masters, a woman who I knew, but loosely because I was downstairs. She saw, or they saw through her, because this gets really weird, that I was out of money. I was trying to get a beer at the bar for like $12 or whatever. They charge you with these things. It was a Halloween dance party. This was October 14th, 2022. I was out of money. She comes up and says, hey, I have a key to the VIP room. We had just come down from there where they hosted a meet and greet with the speakers. I was one of the speakers, so we went up there to get beers, stuff in my pockets. We're going to bring some to our friends. They didn't have to pay $12 for a beer. It sounds like they lured basically Michael P. Masters up there and then they abducted him, folks. The fact that these alien beings were basically at this conference, or basically it was under their observation by them, folks, and they decided to approach Masters here, is kind of frightening, isn't it? Like these beings were watching him, and basically the other UFO enthusiasts and researchers at this conference, and makes you wonder how many basically of these conferences are basically under observation by both alien beings and perhaps basically elements of our own government and others who basically try to keep tabs on what's going on in the UFO world, or should I say the UFO researcher world, and basically dealing with abductions, basically sightings and so on, isn't it, folks? I'm saying this because it's been noted before, folks, that a number of researchers over several decades, UFO researchers and stuff, have basically died under mysterious circumstances. So I wouldn't be surprised if basically this woman that Masters was talking to could have been a government agent, or maybe an alien being. Maybe they wanted him to think that she was an alien. Either way, she lured him up to this VIP room with basically goodies like free beer and basically other things like food, and then they took him. Either way, let's read on. And then she's like, well, you can't go. My friend Eric wants to talk to you. I was like, who's Eric? Don't worry, you'll like him. Just kept saying that over and over. Don't worry, you'll like them. You'll like them. I would have run at that point, folks. You'll like them. You'll like them. Who do you mean by them? Either way, let's continue. So at some point, we ended up in the balcony. I'm just sitting there. I gave up like I'm fine. I guess I'm just waiting for this Eric guy, whoever the hell that is. So eventually, Eric comes in, pulls his chair up right into me, like his knee is on my dick, like straight up right there. That sounds very uncomfortable. I think at that I would have basically not allowed that to happen, folks. Either way, I start to get that. I'm very much in flight, fight or flight or flight thing, and I'm like, like who the fuck this guy? Who the fuck this guy is? This total stranger. Never seen him in my life, and his face is right here. He says, "I sense that you're angry about this, but I need to be this close for this to work." And then it all just went perfectly fine. Sounds like mind control, folks. Like basically he says, yeah, we need to be this close to you in order for this to work. And then everything was just perfectly fine. As if basically at that point, Michael P. Masters just didn't care anymore. That this guy was right up next to him with his knee on his dick. Not in a sexual way, folks. This said basically, it wasn't like he was kneeing him with the dick. It was like basically just, he was that close to him and stuff like that. Basically to a point of basically intruding into people's personal spaces. And they tell me something that was that the same thing they did to you in that dream, something that they knew would shock me and make me pay attention. I'm getting back to the article here, folks. I should have basically been more clear. Let me try that again. And then they tell me something that was the same thing that they did to you in that dream. And I imagine this is what Michael P. Masters was telling Joe Rogan here, folks. Something that they knew would shock me and make me pay attention. So about 2 weeks before this, I'd been washing dishes. Yeah, dishes. I just decided I wanted to quit all of this. I was sick of doing TV shoots and podcasts. I was exhausted. Want to be home with my family. That's it. That was just a thought. Joe Rogan. And just while you were washing, something happened. Michael P. Masters, washing dishes. My wife's right behind me. Didn't tell her anything. Very next thing, he says, we know you've been thinking about quitting lately. Basically, yeah, he didn't tell his wife this, even though she was right behind him at the time. But basically, yeah, they apparently have been watching this man. And basically, the last few weeks, especially at this point when he was washing dishes and he was disgusted with his life and where it was going, basically being the UFO world, folks, he just wanted to stay home with his wife and kids. Apparently, these beings had been watching him, and they found this to basically be disturbing. So they basically sequestered him away while he was at this UFO conference, and basically they sequestered him away, and now they were talking with him directly, of all things. Yeah, and they said to him, yeah, we've been watching you, and we know that you've been thinking about quitting lately, and we really prefer you that you will, and we really prefer you do not do that yet. Complete stranger. I'd never seen this guy in my life, and he knows a thought in my head, or should I say, he knows the thoughts in my head. This is what Michael P. Masters says, folks. So terrifying, right here. Joe Rogan, my head that you had, the thoughts you had in your head that while you were washing dishes, the thoughts in your head right then and there. Yeah, he knew them, and I knew he knew them. At least that's why basically Michael P. Masters basically trying to basically say here, folks. Yeah. Michael P. Masters then responds, this is from 2 weeks privately. And it was just like, how could you possibly know that? And they said, I'm going to use because they used they. I wasn't talking to this guy. It sounds like some sort of TV show entity or entities through him. So basically this guy was basically like a medium, and these beings, these gray aliens, maybe even other aliens, folks, were talking through him to Michael P. Masters. And they said, once you know who we are, you'll know how we know that. And I never had a telepathic moment in my life. And I thought, future humans, that's all I could come up with, because that is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. They didn't answer the question, but they did say, so you know how we did that? And I just go, huh? It doesn't effing answer the question, but in that moment, it placated me enough to move on. It sounds like they manipulated him a bit, folks. Maybe even basically nudged his mind mentally, basically saying to calm down. It's because they didn't answer his question if they were future humans or not. But they said, so you know how we did that, huh? Not answering any question, folks. I mean, are they trying to say that they are from future humans? No, they said, so you know how we did that. Basically talking about basically how they were able to basically know that he was thinking about quitting, that they were basically monitoring him, basically, even though Michael P. Masters says that he's never had basically a telepathic communication in his life. What they were probably doing was listening in on his thoughts and basically, making it obvious, not making it obvious that they were tapping his mind, perhaps back a few weeks ago when he was thinking about quitting. Either way, that's what I'm getting here, folks. But let's read on. And then there was a number of things that transpired. We're out on this balcony, and Michael P. Masters is basically out there talking with this being, and these beings that were talking through this particular man, folks. I'm in shock. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? How does this complete stranger know my thoughts? The conversation evolved. I was allowed to ask questions. They're like, we know you're frustrated. We know you're upset with this. We really like you to keep going. Is there anything you need? Is there anything we can help with? I was like, no, I'm quite happy in general, just exhausted. Don't want to do this anymore. Yeah, we get that. We get that. We get that. And then I was allowed to ask questions. I asked 3 different questions, and people started to come back into this room because the party was wrapping up downstairs, and they're starting to come back to this VIP room where all the free booze was. Does that make sense? And we're out on this balcony. These 3 women come out at one point, and this man who now is right here, are like eyes right here. I can't move anymore. Like I lost the ability to turn my head. I'm just laser focused. So there were 3 women who entered basically to this, where they were on a porch, folks, no, a veranda. I don't remember what they said there, folks, like that. Because the party was wrapping up and they were basically out on this porch, basically, just outside of this I can't believe I can't remember this, folks. There's a word here I just can't remember. Either way, they were on this balcony. I can't, because I basically couldn't remember the word balcony, folks. These 3 women came out out of this room, this VIP room, onto the balcony, watching these 2 men who were facing each other, folks. And Michael B. Masters was just laser focused, basically looking into this man's eyes and communicating with these beings through him, or basically the entity, or should I say, talk show host, because that's what basically Michael P. Masters basically described the man as, and the entities behind him talking through him was basically, at this point, he couldn't basically look away from this man, folks, this TV host, because he was laser focused on him at this point. But these 3 women came out and basically were checking out what was going on. That much you could still do. Either way, folks, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can't get more people watching. Let me go over here, folks. Let's see. We have 10 people watching. Not bad. So we have 14 people watching. That's pretty good. Please share this live stream, folks. Let's see if we can't get more people watching. So please continue watching. Let's get back to this article now. So far, we have 14 people watching, so we have that. Either way, Michael P. Masters is laser focused on what he called basically this talk show host. I mean, it wasn't actually on TV show, folks, but he felt like he was on a talk show talking with this man. But the thing was, remember, these entities, these gray alien beings were talking through this talk show host to Michael P. Masters, and at this point, Michael P. Masters could not look away because, as he put it, he was laser focused on this conversation. But he knew what was going on around him because these 3 women came out onto the balcony and were, as I said, were checking out what was going on, what was happening with these 2 men, perhaps, and probably looking out at the surroundings, basically on the balcony of this VIP room, folks. So let's continue now and see what happened next with Michael P. Masters and this bizarre conversation he was having with with this TV shows and the alien beings who basically were, talking through him. Either way, he said, "Can you close the door behind you?" That was it. And these 3 women turned in perfect unison, walked back and closed the door. Nobody came out for the rest of the time we were out there. And I have to ask, folks, were these women basically in on this? Were they basically government agents? We don't know if this man here, this man who was the TV show host that Michael P. Masters was talking here, folks, and I know he isn't actually a real TV host, but Michael P. Masters felt like he was almost like he was on a talk show, and he was basically being interviewed by this man like he was a TV talk show host. Either way, these three women, either they were alien beings, mind controlled, or maybe they were government agents, and Michael P. Masters was under basically some sort of drug induced hallucination brought on by basically talking with this man. Somehow, cleverly, basically, this drug cleverly basically administered to him, and now he was under some sort of hypnotic control. Maybe the man himself, this agent, as I call him, folks, this talk show host, was actually basically using some sort of hypnotic spell on Michael P. Masters and make him think that he was actually talking to some sort of alien beings who were talking through this man, perhaps. Either way, these three women then left, leaving the two men alone for the rest of this ordeal that Michael P. Masters was going through. So let's continue. Eventually, we got to the point where they're like, we came here because we need to put things in your brain for some future time or times. I forget which, they said. Do we have your permission to do that? And over the course of this interaction, I started to remember them, and I started to feel like a little bitch about complaining about being tired, traveling hotels, flights, And I was like, oh, that's right. I know you. I know who you are. Not that guy I've never seen in my life, but I know you, and there's a familiarity, and this was the breaking down of me. Indeed, folks, because at this point, remember, they wanted him to they wanted to put something in his head. So apparently maybe Michael P. Masters himself has had other prior experiences with alien beings, maybe not with this man particularly, but he did know the entity that was talking to this man. That's what he's saying. Either way, Joe Rogan, me. Yeah, basically, remember, Joe Rogan had a dream. He basically says this experience that Michael P. Masters has, it really feels similar to the dream I had where I talked with these alien beings myself, though I can't basically be for sure if it was an actual encounter with alien beings. Only know it was the most realistic dream I ever had. Either way, once again, let's read the information download again, folks, because I skipped ahead when I shouldn't have. Either way, let's read on. Michael P. Masters, to be able to get past that, to do the things that need to be done, they told me what would happen. I'm going to read through this as quickly as possible, folks, as a refresh. They said that I would continue looking, my eyes would be open, but this darkness would come from top to bottom, and they would put things in my brain, and I would see it coming, but I wouldn't have access to it once they were done. Do you agree? Yeah, so earlier, folks, I thought basically Michael P. Masters has been taken on some sort of spaceship. It doesn't look like he was up on this balcony of this VIP room, and this is where this experience took place. Either way, let's continue. They were very polite, extremely polite. Free will was conserved. Do you agree to this? Are you okay with this? And again, at this point, I remember them. I recognize them. I was like, yes, absolutely. I agree to this. That's exactly what happened. Eyes went dark, still wide open. Eyes went dark, and I see this massive, fast stream of information just going straight into my brain. It was exhausting. It didn't hurt, but it was really overwhelming. I have no idea how long they were doing this. Yeah, I could see it. It was like I could see. I don't remember, but I could see and understand the moment because that wasn't just me. It was this other entity that was basically talking with me as well. Because at this point, the conversation switched from being vocal to telepathic. Like we just started communicating telepathically. It was so seamless that I didn't even really notice it happen. And eventually I'm like, wait, we're not moving our mouths. We're just talking with our brains. But the woman who brought me up there in the first place was standing on my left with her hand on my shoulder. She would occasionally go, did you get that? Did you see that? That was important. Did you get that? So she was watching it too and saw it coming in as it was coming through this individual in front of me. And I could see at this moment, I'd be like, huh? Like I understand all as it comes in. I have no idea how long I was in that mesmerized state, but after they finished, the entire room had 5 times more people in it. There was probably 20 people in this room, all looking at us like, what the F is happening to Masters out there? Like, what is going on, man? Now, you'd think basically maybe other people who were at this UFO conference would have basically been curious what was happening in Masters, or they thought basically he was having some sort of private conversation, so they didn't bother him. But I'd basically be concerned, folks. And maybe I would have intruded on this. Unless these alien beings would somehow basically mind blasted me and basically saying, you don't need to see this, now leave. Where upon it would I basically have been basically a guy basically in Star Wars, basically like these aren't the droids you're looking for, and I would have walked away as soon as basically I keep wanting to say Osama bin Laden, but that's not the guy, folks. Obi-Wan Kenobi basically mind tricked those 3 Imperial soldiers, folks, and they said, And he said to them, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And they said, "Yeah, these are not the droids we're looking for. You can go away now." And they walked off. Either way, would that be what happened to me if I basically intruded in this conversation with Masters? Would they have just mind blasted me and I would have walked away basically in a dreamlike state? Or would I have been able to fight it and basically asked, "What the hell are you doing?" And then would I have realized this was something more? Was something that happened to me then? Who knows? Either way, there were basically 20 more people in this room on this balcony, folks, and they were looking at what was going on with Masters and saying, "What was going on with him, man?" Either way, so let's read on. They lifted me out of this sight. They lifted me out of this sight. Basically, he was starting to come out of it at this point, I would imagine, folks, out of this hypnotic trance that Masters was in, that these alien beings put him in. I returned from bottom to top, the opposite of what happened before. So it was basically as the information download was ending, he was returning back to himself, is what he's saying. And I stand up, turn, walk through this room, and I felt like my head was a bowling ball. Like I could barely even lift my head. And this woman, I think one of the ones that came out before we were on the balcony, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Are you okay?" I was like, I walked past her because he had a little more to think about. And that basically proves to me, folks, that this woman here and the two other women were probably there basically as guards. They were probably basically, as I said, they were making sure that no one basically interfered with this information download that was happening from Michael P. Masters here, because it makes me think that this woman knew something and maybe was even part of it, along with their two friends. Either way, Michael P. Masters then continues. Fortunately, I was on that same floor on the fourth floor of this hotel, walked down, lay back on the bed with my feet still on the floor, all my clothes on, and I just slept in that position for about 13 hours. What? Didn't wake up at all. And when I woke up, I started crying uncontrollably, like I could not stop crying. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I had a memory of what happened the night before, but it was kind of fuzzy. Then as it started to come back more and more and more, I started to be like, oh, like that. That was real, It sounds like basically his experience is just as insane as the experience Joe Rogan had in his dream. But was it real, folks? Or do you think maybe that this was all a put on by the government? Perhaps maybe Michael P. Masters, maybe the government knew that he was going to quit, folks, but they didn't want him to quit because they have some purpose for him. And they altered his mind, folks, on some level and basically gave him this, well, it could, for all we know, folks, basically be just a fake story that they fed him, folks. And basically put him under some sort of hypnotic control, maybe even drugged him, folks, and then basically said to him, "You're not going to give up. You're going to continue with your job, and you're going to believe that you were visited by alien beings." Could that be what we're happening here, folks? Either way, Michael P. Masters, after the experience, basically after waking up from basically sleeping 13 hours, folks, after this ordeal happened, he cried. He basically thought it was all real, and he was like, "Oh, like that? That was real, But could that have been basically all implanted memories, for all we know, folks? Because I would love to ask the other people who were on that balcony with him, folks who were watching this, if they saw this and remember what happened. It could be that all of their minds had been altered on some level, folks. Either way, let's continue with the Masters, and then we move on to the next chapter of this transcript from the Joe Rogan podcast, from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. So let's read on. My first thought was like, oh, that wasn't real, and then I was allowed to remember all of it, everything before they put me in that state is like crystal clear in my mind, and I wrote it all down not long after that, just to make sure I had, had it all, all down. It wasn't me recounting like you were saying. So there was actually a written transcript of how everything happened. Basically, as I said, folks, he wrote everything down as clearly as he remembered it and tried to basically not, put his own flourish on things. He didn't want to basically have his own preconceived notions of what happened, basically color his account. So he wrote down everything as clearly as he could recount, folks. Didn't leave any personal flourishes with it. Didn't leave any, or should I say, write down any preconceived notions of why these beings were there. Just wrote down the information as clearly as he remembered it, folks, and then recounted it and reread it over and over again. Then he could basically come to his own conclusions if he believed this exactly happened like he thought it happened, or maybe he remembered or basically wrote down something he basically wrote down and he basically looked at it again and just says, that didn't happen like that. It happened a little like this. Maybe basically he said he wrote down the information and he didn't leave preconceived notions to basically color his account. He just wrote down as clearly as he could so he could reread it and have other people read it, and then he could come to their own conclusions about it. Either way, it's an interesting notion, folks. If you believe that Michael P. Masters had this account with this, or well, encounter with these alien beings, who, for the most part, folks, look like they were almost like automatons, or basically these people were willingly talking with these alien beings, or maybe working for these alien beings. Were they government agents, perhaps? Maybe actually basically working with these alien beings? Or were they actually just some sort of government organization basically trying to control Michael P. Masters, maybe with drugs and hypnotic suggestion? Either way, they had some purpose for him. That's all we can really say. That's if you believe the account, as I've said so many times before, folks, if you believe it actually happened. Either way, it is certainly an idea. Now, let me go over here, folks. Let's see. Please, by the way, folks, please share this live stream. So far, we have 16 people watching. We just need 4 more people watching, and I'll be happy. So please share this live stream, folks. Let's see if we can get to 20 people watching before this live stream is over. So please share this live stream, folks. Now, let's move on. The reality of anomalous experiences. Sorry, folks, I had to basically reread that part again because I basically jumped ahead by a moment, but it did give us something to talk about here. And now we know the full experience that Michael P. Masters had back in 2022. Only 4 short years ago, folks. But let's read on. Joe Rogan. I should have probably done that. Well, basically, yeah, Joe Rogan says that I should have wrote down what I basically experienced exactly after my dream. I should have probably done that. I should have probably done that, but I know that my recollection of it is pretty accurate. My recollection, my memory, I know that it was very brief. The encounter seemed very brief. It might have gone longer than I think it did, but I can't be for sure. But that's the thing, folks. He should have wrote it down, but he probably would have basically, remember, Michael P. Masters is an actual scientist, so he has experience in basically writing down information as accurately as possible without basically having preconceived notions about it. Most likely, Joe Rogan, basically being a podcaster, would basically wrote it down, but he would have his own preconceived notions about it, basically maybe saying that this happened like that, and this is what I know what happened, but not exactly the exact information of how the experience went down, as it just basically as factually as possible. He would have had it basically left his own little flourishes. People tend to do that, folks, and his own preconceived notions. There's a difference between basically writing something down as basically clearly as possible, as factually as possible, and writing something down basically the way you think you remember it, especially after maybe a certain amount of time, folks, because people tend to forget things. Either way, I wanted to say that before we continue to give you an idea why even Joe Rogan probably, when his account was probably would be very accurate, but would have had, especially now, folks, if he wrote it down, it would have had his own preconceived notions. In fact, folks, we read basically through his account just now, and basically we read through what happened to him, and we have to basically say that, well, it does sound exactly the way he basically does think it happened, but there is some level of preconceived notions that have been basically imparted onto it. He's had time to think about this, folks, trying to remember exactly what happened as clearly as possible, but that tends to basically blend things together at times. Basically, he thinks it happened this way, but in reality, it happened basically just a bit differently. At least basically, if other people basically had the same experience or basically saw it go down exactly, they would have said it went down this way. No, because your way is wrong, Joe Rogan. It happened like this, even though you remember happening like that, because you basically were experiencing it. But I myself, who basically watched exactly what happened, it happened exactly like this. Like it would basically be, I was falling behind these alien beings. I tried to keep with them as closely as possible, while another person who, if they were there and they also saw the same thing, folks, would note that basically Joe Rogan actually maybe stumbled a bit and maybe or basically tried to write himself as much as possible, but he was a little out of it because he was basically a little aghast at everything was going on. This is what I mean by basically preconceived notions, folks, if you have it, because basically some people tend to remember some things about an experience, but while others will see something different. And because sometimes people will remember something happening, but others will not. Get it? This is why basically after an experience like this, folks, you need to write down as quickly as possible, because over time as well, folks, people tend to forget as well. At least tidbits of information. So Joe Rogan's recounting of his dream is probably very accurate, but it still basically has a few things off about it as well. It can happen. Either way, folks, please share out this live stream. Let's see if we can't get 20 people watching. So please share out this live stream. Yeah, so far we have 16 people watching, folks. But we need 4 more people and I'll be happy. So let's continue. And once more, folks, I must say that I probably won't upload my videos today because it's so late anyway. But you are going to get a longer live stream than usual. So let's continue. Either way, where am I going to? Here. Michael P. Masters, well, they might have done the same thing to you. That's why I mentioned it. They might have done the same thing where you weren't necessarily allowed to remember the things that were done. Like they told me that we're going to do this, and are you okay with it? And then missing time. I have no idea how long they were doing that. Indeed, folks, it could have been doing that thing for several hours. He only remembers maybe sleeping 13 hours, but it could have basically been, well, basically before then, folks, as he was on that balcony, it could have been basically several hours because he basically wasn't sure. You'd think that basically when he woke up, folks, he realized that basically he'd been sleeping for 13 hours, but maybe that itself is only really just a guess. Either way, it could have been longer or shorter, folks. And maybe these alien beings, well, they were very polite with basically Michael P. Masters, asking them if they were allowed to do that. And in some cases with alien abduction, folks, these alien beings will basically do things to you. I mean, after all, they basically took you against your will to another place, folks, to a spaceship, perhaps. So they may have done something to Rogan, basically left things in his mind, folks, they can't remember until a certain amount of time goes by, perhaps. That's also something we have to consider. Either way, he doesn't. Michael P. Masters basically says maybe they did that or maybe they don't, but let's continue with what he has to say as well. And then in a dream state, like it could have been dreams often skew time regardless, but maybe if let's say, maybe if, let's just say, hypothetically, you were on a craft, they were breaking you down in the same way that they did me to try to get you, whether now or in the future, like you said, it might have been an initial encounter where there's something more going to happen later, but maybe there was more to it that they just don't tell you or let you have at that moment. Memories of, like they told me I wouldn't remember what they put in my brain, and I don't. But there's more in there, and eventually it will come out. Eventually he'll remember it. And maybe Joe Rogan himself will remember it as well. Joe Rogan, this is what he responds with, which is just what? I would imagine. Well, I mean, what did they put in my brain? Why can't I remember it? And what do they have planned for me, perhaps? Or what am I going to do with it as well? We're going to just guess at that, folks. By the way, let me turn on my heater because I'm kind of chilly. Once again, folks. Yeah, either way, Joe Rogan's asking, which is just what? What happened to me? What do they want? What am I going to do with it if I do remember it, right? Yeah, what am I going to do with it once I remember if they did put something in my head, folks? What do I do with it? That's what Joe Rogan's asking Michael P. Masters here. Michael P. Masters just saying, this is what blows my mind. It's effing insane. It's my brain, right? They put things in there. The ability that they can even do that in the first place is nuts, but I don't have access to it. It's really wild. This is what Michael P. Masters is saying to Joe Rogan, that they might put things in your brain like they did me, but we can't be for sure. But the fact that they can do this is insane, indeed. Joe Rogan then says, how do you know it's in there then? Michael P. Masters then responds, I watched it come in, right? I know it went in, and they told me that it was going to come in, and I saw it happen. But once it's in, you just don't know. Now, that's what makes me think that this could possibly be basically the government, folks. Remember, now, it could be that Joe Rogan and basically Michael P. Masters were actually abducted by the government, and they somehow drugged them and basically make them believe this was all real, folks. I mean, I could even basically imagine that Michael P. Masters, the other people who were at that party at the time, saw this go down, but maybe they themselves were under some sort of hypnotic, basically suggestion, brought on by basically drug use and maybe some sort of mind control technique, folks. They saw this all happen, but it didn't actually happen at all. What happened was basically these governments came in, mind controlled these people, and basically, put them under some sort of control. The same could be basically said of Joe Rogan here, folks, but we can't be for sure. Perhaps there's nothing actually in their heads, folks. Only basically maybe only the dregs of basically whatever mind control program they'd been subjected to. Because the drugs, if they were basically administered with some sort of drugs, folks, or have already long since basically burned themselves out of both men's systems at this point. So we can't be for sure what actually happened. Did they actually talk with alien beings, or was it something else entirely? It's something to consider. By the way, folks, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can get more people watching, so please share this out. But let's continue. Either way, Joe Rogan asks, how do you know it's in there then? Yeah, Michael B. Masterson says, I want you to come in. But as I said, folks, maybe there's nothing there. Maybe basically what actually happened was these government agents, maybe they wanted them to believe it was aliens behind this, and that's it. So even if basically Joe Rogan or basically Michael P. Masters goes into post-hypnotic regression therapy, they'd find nothing there, perhaps. That's also a possibility. We just don't know for sure. It certainly is a frightening notion too, folks. By the way, folks, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can't get more people watching, so please share it out. Now, where was I? Yeah, let's get back to the article, folks. Either way, Joe Rogan then says, right, but does that make any sense? Like, I think about it. If they're giving you information, what is the point of giving someone information that they can't access? Because maybe basically there's an idea here, folks. If they are under some sort of control or basically under some sort of time limit, maybe at a certain amount of time, both men, Michael P. Masters and Joe Rogan, will get access to the information, at least some of it, in a certain amount of time after it happened. Basically, maybe a few years later, they'll remember what happened, folks, and they'll know what they're supposed to do with this information. Michael P. Masters then responds to Joe Rogan's question, basically why he can't access this information if these aliens did put in his head, folks, is, well, that's what they said, though. They said for a time or times in the future. It's time release. It's time stamped at some point, whatever that was that they thought was so important to abduct me at this conference, effing with me for about 5 minutes afterwards, is going to come out at some point. Indeed, folks, he's trying to say that either way, he thinks this information is time stamped. It will come out when it basically wants to come out, when it's time. And that's just period right there, folks. Either way, Joe Rogan then says, have you ever considered the possibility of some dropped acid into your beer? That's what I'm thinking here as well, folks. It's basically they drugged him, maybe government agents or aliens. They did this to him, basically. They did this to him for some purpose, maybe for some program. They want him to they want Michael P. Masters out there and doing what he's doing here, folks, because maybe they're using him as maybe controlled, as some sort of controlled source of, some sort of, I guess, or should I say semi-controlled, some semi-controlled agent under their thumb, perhaps. Maybe. Or maybe these alien beings were alien beings and they did this for some other purpose. Maybe because they still want him to do his job. Maybe they still want him to do his job. I don't know. We just don't know, folks. I mean, really, we don't know any of it. Michael B. Masters, yeah, I have. He's considered that basically he might have been drugged, folks. Joe Rogan, because that would be such a cruel thing to do to someone at a UFO conference and then F with them and say, sit down, look in my eyes. I'm going to give you information now. You're like, oh my God, it's coming information coming. Michael P. Masters, problem is I've done acid over 200 times, so I know exactly what that's like. But have you taken DMT or any other number of basically types of drugs that cause basically hallucinations like mushrooms or basically something similar? Remember, ayahuasca itself was basically converted into DMT, folks. This drug that basically causes ayahuasca's hallucinations was basically refined into DMT. So it could be that maybe Michael P. Masters had basically some sort of drug administered to him. It could basically be something he's known about, like acid, or it could be some brand new hallucinogenic drug he doesn't know about, folks. So he wouldn't know basically what to look for. So even though he's basically, I've done acid over 200 times. So maybe at this point, maybe he doesn't know the exact ramifications of what was done to him, folks. Because maybe he basically had a drug he never had before administered to him. And this is what put him in this hypnotic state. If it was acid, maybe he would realize what was going on. We just don't know for sure, folks. Either way, Joe Rogan then says it was a flashback. That's what they say. That was the thing. They always, I never heard of one effing person getting a flashback, by the way. I can understand that, folks. Basically, I guess maybe he's talking about this information download, or the fact that basically, if you take basically certain drugs like acid, you can have flashbacks. But then again, or basically it's said that you basically can get flashbacks. Though Joe Rogan says basically he's never heard of one person actually getting a flashback by basically taking these drugs. He just knows that people did say that they did happen, but he's never known a person basically actually saying that happened, or basically the person saying that basically directly to him, basically saying that he had a flashback. And basically and when they recount when they basically took acid or another drug that could basically give you a hallucinogenic effect. At least that's what I think Joe Rogan means here, folks. By the way, folks, once again, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can't get to 20 people watching before this live stream is over. So let's continue. Michael P. Masters, I know I feel robbed, dude. I was before. We crack our back and we're going to get a flashback. Joe Rogan, when you drive in your car, man, and you run into the bus full of kids, yeah, indeed, folks. Yeah. No, yeah, I know I feel robbed, dude. I was before. That's what Malcolm Masters says here, folks. We crack our backs and we're going to get a flashback. Basically, that's what he's trying to say, folks. At a certain point of time, folks will get a flashback to the point with the information that he says was downloaded into his mind by these alien beings. And Joe Rogan says that, yeah, when you drive your car, man, and you run into a bus full of kids, you think you'll basically have some sort of flashback to that point of something happening, perhaps. Basically, if something traumatic happens, will you get a flashback? Or basically, if at some point in time when you're basically driving behind, basically, say, a busload of kids, or maybe at basically some point when you're behind some woman at a convenience store who's basically in front of you in line, maybe you'll have that flashback then. That's what Joe Rogan's trying to say there, folks, I guess. What will happen once this happens? What will you see? At least that's what I'm guessing is what Joe Rogan means. Michael B. Masters, though, responds with, it's like how they told everybody was going to give us free drugs on the playground. Indeed, folks. We don't know for sure when it's going to happen, or basically say that basically like with how people basically handed out free drugs on a playground. We don't know if it's basically going to happen like that because it never happened to me like that. I know no one ever basically offered me free drugs. A cigarette once, but no free drugs, folks. Either way, it certainly is odd. Either way, yeah. So maybe they'll never get actual flashback to what this information will happen, folks. They just basically said we only think that'll happen, so we can only just guess at that. So, but then again, for all we know, folks, nothing will ever come out of both experiences. Maybe they'll never have a flashback. Maybe they'll never know the information put in their heads. Maybe it's just basically like someone just effing with both Joe Rogan and Michael P. Masters here, for all we know. I mean, that could be the case too, folks. Okay, we have 5 people watching, folks. That's good. We have 17 people watching. Let me go over here real quick, folks. Okay, we have 17 people watching. Not bad, but please, folks, please share this live stream. Let's see if we can get more people watching. So let's continue. Yeah, we have 17 people watching. Thank you for that. But we can live stream a bit longer, folks. So let's continue with this and see where it goes. Either way, yeah. Now, Joe Rogan, nope. No one basically ever offered me free drugs on the playground. Though we're talking about Joe Rogan here, he's basically had a lot of drugs in his life. Either way, Michael P. Masters then says, nobody ever gave me free drugs either. Yeah, Joe Rogan, no drugs. Michael P. Masters, no, it was not. I'd actually only ever had 2 beers the entire night. I was completely sober, so I know it wasn't a hallucination as far as I can see, folks. I know that basically no one drugged him. But remember, he did say that basically he had 2 beers the entire night. Maybe someone did sink something into his beer. Was this beer basically from a bottle or a can? Did you have the bottle with you all the time? Did you basically get this bottle from basically did someone hand you a beer earlier? Is what basically we have to consider, folks. Did someone basically hand you a couple of basically a glass of beer and you down it? Did you know exactly where it came from? Did you see them just prepared for you? Did anyone else basically say that they had some weird experiences after drinking a beer the night before, folks? For all we know, folks, this beer came from basically a dispenser, like basically some guy basically at a bar basically poured him a beer, and all the beer that was basically in basically the vicinity was drugged, for all we know, folks. And then maybe basically Michael P. Masters took it. We just can't be for sure. But either way, folks, it's something to consider too. Was the entire experience that Michael P. Masters had with this 2022 mini basically abduction real, or was it just a drug-induced hallucination that was done to him by someone effing with him? Maybe for a purpose, folks. Maybe a government purpose. Perhaps maybe the government working with alien beings, or maybe just basically trying to control Michael P. Masters. As I said, maybe he's basically he's controlled opposition. They want him to keep doing basically looking into the alien question because to them he's a useful idiot. I don't want to basically insult Michael P. Masters' intelligence here, folks, but has he ever considered that maybe the government did this to him because they're using him as controlled opposition to some degree? I mean, he himself will say that he's not controlled, but if they did basically put him under some sort of hypnotic suggestion, perhaps, he has to consider that possibility, much like Joe Rogan has possibly has to consider that his dream might have been more than a dream, but maybe it was a hallucination brought by basically some sort of drug use that had been administered to him by someone, perhaps in the government, folks, that wanted to use him for some purpose in the future, and that has to do with the alien question. Perhaps maybe they're using him as some sort of controlled opposition, and he doesn't know it from the basically at all. But because if he is, or should I say, if both men, Michael P. Masters and Joe Rogan, are under some sort of hypnotic suggestion, they wouldn't know about it at all. Under some sort of mind control, would they? Like MK Ultra. Now that's a scary thought, folks. Indeed, that is a scary, scary thought. By the way, folks, once again, please share this live stream. We just need, 3 more people watching. So please share this live stream and stuff like that. Now, where was I? Yeah. Either way, yeah. Now, Joe Rogan then says, so it was kind of an experience that was very anomalous. Basically, to you, Michael P. Masters, he did say, yeah, that's what basically Michael P. Masters felt. Both basically him and Joe Rogan with his own experience that he had with this dream. That he says that he had encountered alien beings in his dream and felt more real than any dream he ever felt in his life. But the thing with Joe Rogan, folks, is that he isn't so sure he was encountering alien beings. To him, it was still a dream. He has no evidence saying that he was abducted or anything like that. All he knows is that his dream was the most powerful one, most realistic one he'd ever had in his entire life. So there might be something to it. Either way, let's read the next chapter of this, of this Joe Rogan, basically experience type, episode. The transcript from the episode, folks. The next chapter is titled Time-Stamped Information and Future Knowledge. Let's read this part, folks. Michael P. Masters externally, and so here's another aspect of it. They knew my future. They knew everything about me. They knew my thoughts. That's how they broke me down, and they even knew where I was going to be the next day. They saw it, that effed me up. And I was not doing well. Like I wasn't crying I wasn't crying or basically I was or being so sad or scared or anything. It was just a psychological response to whatever they did. Indeed, because basically he wasn't going to let it basically stop him here, but he knew that they were watching him, and that probably basically did frighten him, but it wasn't going to stop him. It certainly wasn't going to let the fear basically put a wall on him. But as I said earlier, folks, maybe that was the point of it. Maybe they wanted to believe all of this that did happen, and they didn't want him to give up because they were using Michael P. Masters, as I said, as some sort of controlled opposition, something that he himself, even though he thinks he's acting out in his own free will, maybe he doesn't realize that he's basically become a Manchurian candidate. He's under the control of entities or even people in the government, folks, that he didn't realize before. Or maybe because he's being programmed like a computer, folks, he can't realize it all. Either way, he was, in his opinion, folks, he just wasn't going to stop, but maybe that was the point of it to begin with. Either way, he continues to say, or should I say, Michael P. Masters continues, I'm walking down through the main corridor to give a book to a friend of mine, John Dover, Navajo Ranger. Pardon me, by the way, folks. And that's the same guy who comes around the corner, comes down, puts his hand on my shoulder and says, are you okay? I was not okay, but I go and they fixed me somehow. His touch on my shoulder released all the, released all the whatever that was messing me up. And as I said, folks, that sort of sounds like basically some sort of post-hypnotic suggestion to me. Like basically maybe these people are checking up, making sure that basically this information transfer had basically happened perfectly, or maybe this mind control this mind control that they just did on Michael P. Masters was working perfectly, and they did so by basically making sure that basically one of the steps that they can use to control him, basically a hypnotic suggestion, by putting his hand on his shoulder, folks, that feels like basically almost like it was part of some sort of hypnotic suggestion. By doing so, he activated some sort of pre-programmed response in Michael P. Masters, basically calming him down and making sure that he would continue on with what they wanted him to do. Basically calm him down, he would just get on with it, as it were. Because he felt relaxed at that point, folks. And that really reminds me of basically many stories of people basically being put under hypnotic suggestion. Either way, that's my idea. Either way, Michael P. Masters then goes on to say they knew where I would be at that exact moment for him to come there. He wasn't part of this conference. He had nothing to do with this. He was used as some sort of vessel or some sort of medium for this, and well, yeah, for this end, whatever what means, I don't know because the things haven't come out of my brain yet, but they are time stamped for the future, perhaps, or maybe, as I said, folks, maybe whatever they wanted to do to you and have you do for them, you're already doing. Because remember, Michael P. Masters says that basically this all happened because he was thinking about quitting the UFO world, stop being a researcher on this phenomena, but maybe, as I said, maybe he's controlled opposition, and this entire thing happened. This ordeal with this with these alien beings happened because they wanted to continue with his job, folks. Because remember, they did say that. Yeah, they did say that, and they basically put some whammy on his mind, folks, so he continued doing what he was doing. Either way, Joe Rogan then responds, I completely believe you, I completely believe this experience happened to you. And basically, well, Joe Rogan has nothing to basically say that he doesn't believe it either, folks. He just says, and for all he knows, folks, maybe this did happen, but we can't be for sure one way or the other. As I said, folks, hearing Michael P. Masters' story here, folks, makes me think that maybe something more was done to him. Something along the lines of basically an MK Ultra style experiment was done to him. Maybe in some way, folks, Michael P. Masters is some sort of controlled opposition in the UFO, in the UFO researcher world, folks. He doesn't realize it, but he basically is doing the bidding of his masters that he doesn't know he has, folks, because they basically put something onto his mind. And while he is acting, basically, while he believes he is acting his own free will, he's under the control of these beings, maybe alien or maybe human. Just don't know. The way Michael B. Masters then says, it's not a belief, but it's not a belief, but not a belief. Well, that I believe in, folks, but I do believe that I think something happened to me. I think this is what I'm supposed to do, and maybe this information will come out. That's while I don't believe have it as a belief, I just know it will. At least I'm trying to basically explain what basically Michael P. Masters is saying here, folks, because he says it's not a belief, but not a belief. So it's not a belief, but not a belief. So yeah, he's trying to say, folks, that he thinks it happened. He doesn't want to believe it happened because it's just a belief, folks. He doesn't want to basically say that he believes it happens because he has no proof, folks. He just knows it happened to him, even though he has no physical proof. That's the problem here, folks. He can't prove that it happened. He can't prove that this man he talked to was an alien or basically was being controlled by aliens. All he knows is that basically he doesn't want to call it a belief, and that's it, folks. But it's really just no more than that. But he does know it happened to him. That much he basically says. Okay. Either way, folks, so far insane. Now, by the way, folks, please share this live stream. We just need, 3 more people to duck into the stream, so please do so. But let's continue. Either way, he goes on to say, well, they did it in a way where other people were they involved, so I didn't even get to pretend it happened. Yeah, but because these other people that were there and who were on this balcony with basically Michael P. Masters and this other man, folks, they saw all this going on, and while they were probably thinking it was weird, they didn't think that aliens were involved, and he can't prove that and Michael P. Masters can't prove aliens were involved. All he knows is they sat close to this man, and he basically said that and this information download was done to him. For all we know, folks, he was under some sort of hypnotic control, and that's it, because no one else is going to basically verify it one way or the other either. So that's basically very hard for Michael B. Masters. He can't prove that it happened, but he knows that he does know it happened to him. That's what he believes. He doesn't want to call it just a belief, folks, because he does know it happened to him, but that's a little better than basically just a belief. He just believes it happened because he has no proof proving it did. Sadly, folks. That's why he doesn't want to call it a belief, but even though that's exactly what it is. But let's continue, because Michael P. Masters, and they did because maybe that's exactly what happened. That's what I think happened, but I can't prove any of it. That's what he basically says, folks. Either way, let's basically move on to the next chapter of this transcript. Imagining the weight of contact. Joe Rogan, but I want those people to imagine what it would be like if that happened to you. For me, it's easy because mine was in a dream, and I'll tell you it's a dream. I think it was a dream. It was the most vivid dream I've ever had, but it was a dream. It was really weird. I couldn't shake it. It really freaked me out. Yeah, it really freaked me out. I had to talk about this and about it in the moment. I got on a podcast next. I was like, this is something that I have to bring it right up away because it's just so weird. Basically, when basically Joe Rogan talks about his dream and basically what happened to him, folks, he says that basically it felt real. It felt so effing real. I couldn't basically just stop. I had to talk about it because it just I basically, in his own words, folks, I would imagine he's been waiting for something like this to happen to him his entire life because he's believed in aliens, he's believed in supernatural, and this dream was so real. It was more than that. Unfortunately, he can't prove it actually happened, much like Michael P. Masters can't prove what happened to him either, folks, back in 2022. All he knows is that it was a very strong experience and that he had to talk about it because it was just so strong in his own words, folks. Michael P. Masters, and I thank you for doing that. By the way, it was bravery. It was very brave to talk about this. Indeed, I mentioned it basically, Michael P. Master says that when Joe Rogan talked about his dream, it was very brave of him to do so. Because he himself basically has his own experience to talk about, and he did so on the podcast with him on this night, folks. Either way, Joe Rogan then says, but I was talking to Brett Weinstein, who is an evolutionary biologist. Like, it's not just the topic to talk about it, but like, I have to tell you this because it was one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. A lot of weird shit I've had. It's a lot of weird shit I've had. I've had a weird life. That was the weirdest. It was weird because it was so strange. Yeah, he was talking to Brett Weinstein during that podcast when he basically revealed his dream, folks, and it had nothing to do with basically evolutionary biology, but he had to talk about it with someone and talk about it with some people and share what happened to him. I can see why basically why Joe Rogan had to do so because it just was burning in his brain at that point. This experience, this dream that he had. So there's that, folks. Very insane. No. I can imagine basically this evolutionary, biologist basically being confronted with basically this weird dream on Joe Rogan's Experience podcast and basically being, wasn't I here basically to talk about evolutionary biology? Why am I talking about your dream about aliens? This Brett Weinstein guy, it must have been very weird for him. Either way, Joe Rogan had to talk about his dream then. Very strange. Either way, Michael P. Masters then responds, it took me a year to talk about this. I went basically that long, just basically trying to summarize what happened to him, trying to understand what happened to him, and just let it grill in his own brain. Joe Rogan then says, let me finish here. Michael P. Masters, oh, sorry, I didn't know you were. Joe Rogan, this is what I for people that are very skeptical. This is what I do for people that are very skeptical. And stuff like that. Basically, talking about my experience, talking with people about their experiences, about what they believe and stuff like that. This is what I do. I talk about it. Michael P. Masters, Either way, we're pretty much at the end now. Joe Rogan then says, I want you to imagine yourself in a position where something like this happens to you. You're a regular guy. You're a mechanic for Chevrolet, whatever you are. And this thing happens to you. And what do you do now? What do you do with this? And who the effing is going to believe you? Indeed, you wouldn't have believed you. So why would you? You don't even want to tell people. It's that crazy. And if these things are happening, they're not happening to 7 billion people, right? They're happening to select individuals for whatever known reasons all over the place. And if that is happening to 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000, whatever it is over time, these people have they all have similar stories. Indeed. I get being skeptical. I get it. I'm a skeptical person with a lot of stuff. I go back and forth. I'm a believer. And I'm like, shut up. I'm with you. But you've got to imagine what you would do if that happened to you, if these are unique experiences. Indeed, folks, if something like this happened to you, would you believe it? Would you believe anyone who told you that they had been abducted with aliens? Most people would not, unfortunately, but some would. But it's still the problem and burden of proof. You can say that you were abducted. You can say you were abducted by aliens, or basically met or saw cryptids, folks, or saw something supernatural. But the burden of proof is yours and yours alone. You have to prove it happened. You have to find actual evidence. Unfortunately, actually getting that evidence is nearly impossible. As no one's ever basically presented any actual evidence of basically anything like this for real ever. I mean, there have been cases where cryptids have been proven to be real, folks, but that usually involves some unknown animal that basically, for whatever reason, remained unknown to science. And that could basically that's more easily proved than basically proving the supernatural or basically aliens exist. Because you usually can't get any actual physical proof of it. of your experiences. And basically, if you do have this such an experience, folks, you can't really prove it. It is indeed insane, folks. So far, we have 4 people watching, folks. Let me see here. We have 16 people watching. We have 16 people watching. 16, 17, 18, 19 people watching. Good. We just need one more person to watch, folks. We have 19 people watching. So let me do this real quick, folks. We have 20 people watching. Thank you for making this a truly great live stream, folks. But let's finish. We have 20 people watching, so we have that today. Let's finish off this particular article, transcript of this Joe Rogan Experience podcast, folks, and have some more fun. At least I'll try to. Either way, Joe Rogan says, if this did happen to you, can you imagine how insane it would be, folks, if you're just some mechanic or some guy, basically some schlub, and you had no one to talk to, folks, and the burden of proof is you to basically prove it? All you can really do is find other people that have had similar experiences, because those are really the only ones who would really know and basically understand what you've been through. You would have people believe you, folks, and stuff like that, and they would know that it happened to you, but they wouldn't have the same experience because they never had it happen to them. But if you found other people who had other experiences, they would know what you were going through. Unfortunately, that's basically only like a few 100,000 people. It's hard to find that many people, folks. Because a lot of people don't want to come forward and say that they were abducted by aliens or had something weird happen to them. But if you do find them, I imagine these people do find basically solace in the fact that they're not the only ones who had this experience happen to them. Either way, Now, Michael P. Masters then says, that's a great point. Joe Rogan, unique experiences, totally novel experiences that most people don't have, trying to describe it. And everybody who I've ever talked to, including Travis Walton, who's, by the way, very believable, like very, very believable. The way they describe has the weight to it. Like, I know no one's going to effing believe me. I know this is crazy, but I have to tell you that this happened. Imagine being Travis Walton, indeed, folks, and how extraordinarily insane his story is. Michael P. Masters, Joe Rogan, that's what I want people to think about. The people that are very skeptical, because this never happened to you, but there are people out there that do believe that this happened to them. Maybe it didn't happen. Maybe it was some sort of hallucination, folks. I mean, Joe Rogan even says that his dream might just have been a dream, but it was the most effing real dream he ever had. It was something more to him. It left him with this experience. Now, he can't prove it happened to him, and most likely it was just a dream, but it was, as he said in his own words, folks, the most effing dream, the most insane effing dream he ever had, and it felt real. So he has that. He doesn't even say that he was really abducted by aliens, folks. He can't prove it, but he does know he had this dream, and it was insane to have. So I can understand that. Hickey Pop 53. Hey, amigo. Hey, Higgy Pop 53. Thank you for tuning in. Well, thank you for basically tuning in for the last chunk of this live stream. Either way, let's continue. How much time do we have left? We have a few more minutes, so let's continue, folks. We have 20 people watching, but let's have a little more fun now. By the way, please start this live stream. Either way, that's what Joe Rogan was saying about basically to skeptical people. Give people who've had these experiences a year at least, because maybe they need someone to talk to about it at the very least, even if you don't believe them. And those people who had these experiences, folks, sometimes you just need to find other people who had similar experiences so you can load all that happened to you, because you need someone to talk to about it. At least that's my opinion, folks. Either way, Michael P. Masters then says, I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of people don't think about that part, how hard it is. It is not just some crazy shit like that happened, but how hard it is to then talk about it and subject yourself to the ridicule and the scorn that comes with it, indeed. Joe Rogan, of course, and the possibility that you might just be some different disinformation artist, just some bullshit artist that's sent down here to muddy up the narrative. Indeed, folks, because there are people who do spread disinformation. That's a problem here, folks. It basically muddies the grounds. And then there's also all the hoaxers who just want to make a buck off of all of it as well. Those are also the kind of people who basically pop up here and get this kind of, in these kinds of circles too. So you have to separate these people from people who actually had genuine experiences, at least basically as genuine as they basically can, as these people believe it did happen to them. Either way, there's that. But let's move on. Michael P. Masters then responds, absolutely. And if I hadn't, I I have thought about that. Like, what if you know there's some sort of mind control thing that's the government has or whatever, and this is what happened to you? Indeed, folks, I mentioned that maybe what happened to basically Michael P. Masters. He says that basically he had this mini abduction happen to him, and well, Joe Rogan says that basically felt in his dream that it was basically he felt that he really met aliens. But he can't prove that it happened. He doesn't even say that he really met aliens, folks. All he says is this dream was so real to him. They have to consider that maybe it was some sort of mind control that was done to them as well. And the idea has come to them as well, folks. Either way, they had these experiences, and that's the scary thought. What does it really mean? Okay, folks, we have 21 people watching. Thank you. Yeah, we have 21 people watching, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Now, let me go over here real quick, folks. Yeah, we have 21 people watching. No, not bad. All right, Higgy Pop, imprinted memories. Indeed, folks. And a lot of these experiences of people being abducted, we have to understand that basically maybe they're subject to some sort of MK Ultra style mind control, that the government did this to them, maybe to test out drugs, or maybe some sort of hypnotic or mind control techniques. And what happened to them was them having imprinted memories to hide the fact that they were abducted by the government. Perhaps. Now, let's get to this next part, the Betty and Barney Hill case. Joe Rogan, have you ever heard about the recording of Betty and Barney Hill? Michael P. Masters, yeah. Joe Rogan, yeah. Jamie, see if you can find those. Michael P. Masters, yeah, they're kind of trippy because they're kind of insane folks. Yeah, they're recordings of what happened to these people and how they were counted. The first people who were abducted, Betty and Barney Hill, and what they had to say on those tapes, folks. Joe Rogan, yeah, trippy. Michael P. Masters, I don't think that's the case in this situation because of the way it happened, how it happened, their uber politeness, and the fact that I was allowed to leave my body and see and remember things that I normally wouldn't. Indeed, folks, he's saying that unlike basically the encounter of Betty and Barney Hill, the thing that happened to him was that these beings were very polite to him. They allowed him to accept if he wanted this to happen or not. And they let him decide if this could happen. They just didn't just force themselves on Michael P. Masters. No, they allowed him to decide if he wanted this information or not. Either way, let's read on with basically what happened to Betty Barney Hill. Joe Rogan, well, also I'll take into the context of who you are, the time we live in. Betty and Barney Hill, I believe it was in the 1950s. They're an interracial couple in New England, so they have a lot of anxiety just on that. Imagine being a pioneering interracial couple in the 1950s. I mean, the effing racism they must have experienced so the level of anxiety that they must have slept with, thinking about the KKKs going to show up and at any point in time and burn an effing cross on their lawn. Indeed, they had to worry about that. So you still got all of that too. Then there's a completely novel experience where no one has talked about this one before. Two of the first people they are the OGs. So this is a tape of Dr. Benjamin Simon and patient Barney Hill play this. Indeed, Michael P. Masters is right over my right. God, what is that? This is basically what Barney Hill has to say here, folks. Yeah, Michael P. Masters, as they basically listen to this. My God, what is that? I tried to maintain control so Betty cannot tell. I'm scared, God. I'm so scared. It's all right. You can go right on. The experience will not hurt you now. I got to get my God. This is what Barney Hill says in his experience there, folks, when he was abducted. Joe Rogan, all right. And Michael P. Masters, that's intense. Joe Rogan, this is in 1961. Wild. Either way, Michael P. Masters then says, and like they say, that's actually, I haven't thought about that. I did a whole case study on Betty and Barney Hill in my second book. I hadn't even really thought about that. Like, it's already hard to talk about stuff. They were the OGs. They're the first interracial couple coming out publicly describing these horrific events. Yeah. Remember, they were the first ones who had these events. They were an interracial couple, folks, and they were the first to basically be abducted and experimented on by these beings. Can you imagine how insane it was for these people? Ooh. Either way, Joe Rogan then says, also these events in 1961, no one had heard about anything like that. No one had heard anything about that, or that it was possible that basically beings from space could come down and abduct you and experiment on you. So insane. That's if you believe it actually happened, folks. Now, how much more of this is left? We still have a lot left, don't we? I think I might end my live stream now, folks, because maybe save the rest for tomorrow, perhaps, and stuff like that. Because I want to get through this, but we are basically nearing the point where I have to cut this off, I suppose. And we have 21 people watching. So an insane live stream, folks. We have 21. Yeah, we have 22 people watching, by the way. So I think I'll end my live stream now. Either way, it was pretty much fun. Ooh. Either way, please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics That Are Bad For You. There's misspelled. It's THERE. It's Read Comics That Are Bad For You. It's supposed to be Read Comics They're Bad For You, but it's They're Bad For You. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out to anywhere, any site you want. Now, please go over and subscribe to Dark Saints on YouTube and on BitChute. Then go subscribe to Robot Co-op on YouTube and on Twitch. I also want you to go over and subscribe to Stitched Together Pics up on YouTube, okay? Now, remember, down in the descriptions or in the chat, I left links. I left links to YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch or BitChute, Dark Saints, Robot Co-op, and Stitched Together Pics. Now, usually I upload 2 videos a day, folks, but I'm thinking about basically skipping the day because it's so later than usual. Either way, I might upload 2 videos, and they'll be up soon after this live stream, or basically a little after it, folks. So if I do upload them, well, they'll be up after this live stream is over, folks, at some point. Let's just say that. Maybe not soon. Either way, one video will be up on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, or BitChute, and the other will be up on Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, and BitChute. Well, that's Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, or BitChute as an exclusive, okay? Either way, remember as well, folks, I'm going to unlist this live stream up on YouTube. If you still want to watch it, basically, you can stay on the YouTube stream as long as you want, folks. But if you click off it, it will be unlisted. But it'll still be available on Rumble or BitChute. So you can use those links down below. Yeah, you can use those links down below or in the descriptions and go subscribe to me, okay? Because all my videos, all my live streams are up on the sites 24/7. Or you can use the link on my X page at 777megachris1, okay? Also, remember, folks, my book, Scumdogs, my comic book, if you basically back my book, your copy is coming. It should already be in the mail and sent out to you if you've not already had it. I'm telling you this because I'm going to do a second chance campaign for my comic book, Scumdogs. I'm going to try to do pre-launch pages for it up this month, hopefully. They'll be up on Rumble, Indiegogo, and GoFund my comic book. So look for these pages, and in a few months, I'm going to do a second chance campaign for my comic book, Scumdogs, so you all can back it if you want to, if you're not back it before, or if you want to back it again. Either way, I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kindle. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great live stream, followed by 2 more great videos, so make sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon, so bye. Yeah.